Desmond Cook.
Yeah.
We're with the FBI.
Okay.
When was the last time you were in California?
You know Miss Patricia Owens?
No.
Do you recognize this woman?
What does this have to do with me?
We found this note where she was murdered.
Welcome to Uncut with me, Lucia. So today we have Elliot Mason, and he's the author of 2 books, The Arlington Orders and The Legal Killer. So Elliot, welcome to Uncut.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So you were always told you had talent for writing. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I was growing up, when I was kind of shy about it. Really, I like to write little short stories when I was even going as far back as elementary school, but mainly middle school. I would write little short stories or poetry, but I was always too embarrassed to share it with anybody. So it would usually end up on bits and pieces of scrap paper that I would shove in a drawer here, or sometimes it would end up on my bedroom floor because I was a messy kid. And my parents would find it, and they would sometimes read it, and they go, "Wow, we think you have, some ability." But at that time, being a young kid, kids know everything, and I thought I knew everything. So my thought was, that's just mom and dad. What do they know? They don't know what they're talking about. So I was very shy about it. But yeah, I started being told that I had a talent for it probably when I was in elementary school, but really beginning in middle school, I started to get noticed even then. But it was I was really shy about it. I was not confident in my abilities whatsoever.
Maybe earliest memory of you writing?
Probably my earliest memory was writing. I had an assignment in class where we had to write a short story. And if I remember it now, it was a short story about, I think it was about a virus that because we had to pick some type of horror. That was the genre we were writing. And I was probably in 7th grade, I think. So I was just a kid, probably 13 years old. And I remember writing out this story thinking it was awful. I mean, I thought, oh boy, I was embarrassed to turn it in because I thought it was so bad. And some of the other kids told me their ideas, and I thought, wow, their ideas are so much better than mine. And I ended up getting an A on the paper, and the teacher said, "This is the example of what I want done." And I was like shocked because it was like, I didn't think it was any good. I thought it was, quite frankly, I thought my work was lousy. So that was the earliest memory of actually getting recognition and basically writing out a full story. It wasn't that long. It was probably maybe 4 or 5 pages, but for a middle schooler, that's, seems like an eternity. So that was my earliest memory of doing it.
Yeah, and what was your inspiration for writing your first book, The Arlington Orders?
I love historical fiction, and I love historical fiction mixed with suspense. So I'm a big fan of Dan Brown. I love the research he does. And I love the idea of taking on a real subject matter or a real historical event and then applying it to a fictional story. But when I first started, I had no idea what I wanted to do. People said, "Oh, you ought to write a book." And I've been hearing that for years from my family, some of my friends. And I thought, that's great. You're telling me write a book. And the first thought is, about what? What do I write a book about? That's easy to tell someone, hard to do. So I couldn't figure out. And I knew that my love was basically history. I loved it. And one night I was watching the History Channel and watching a show about something called the Dahlgren Affair, which is a historical event. I was a history major in school. It was a historical event that I had heard about, but didn't really know much about. And then I remember it was basically a story of a young Union colonel who was killed 6 miles outside the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. And when they searched his body, they found a set of orders on him. And the order said, you are to kill President Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy at the time. You are to kill everybody in the Confederate government, and you are to burn Richmond to the ground. And at that time, that was a big shock because there was kind of this gentleman's agreement between the two sides that civilian heads of state, like presidents or government leaders, would not be targeted. So because the South was losing the war, they decided to, and this latest threat, they decided to evacuate the capital of Richmond, Virginia. And this is all true. Getting the people out was not the problem. The real problem was they had all of their gold and silver reserves, which basically was their treasury, which was the money they used to fight the war. So they literally devised a secret covert operation to move the treasury down to Savannah, Georgia. And they implemented this operation, and it disappeared without a trace. And to this day, no one knows what happens or what happened to it. So I took that story, and then I said, okay, how can I take the story that is actually historical fact and apply it to modern times? And that's how the story came about, where I have two they're kind of lost souls. They're both, one's a master's student in history, and the other one is a history teacher or professor. And they stumble on to clues. But they don't realize other people are looking for it, and they're all looking for it for different reasons. And it's kind of this very dark political thriller. So a lot of people hear it and they say, oh, that sounds like National Treasure. It is not National Treasure. It's very dark. And there's a lot of social issues that come up from today that are put into the book. So that's kind of how that's a kind of a long explanation, but that's how it kind of came about.
That's super interesting. And how do you do all this research?
It depends on what I'm doing. So for that book, obviously none of those people are still alive since the Arlington orders happened. The impetus for the book started in the mid 1800s. But I do a lot of historical research. I'll go to libraries. I'll do a lot of reading. If it's something that's more modern, I'll interview people. So for my latest book, The Legal Killer, which deals a lot with the Department of Justice, I interviewed people who would only speak to me on condition of anonymity because they were frightened, and for good reason. Their safety would be in jeopardy. But I talked to people who were involved in the Department of Justice or who had dealings around it. So I go to actual original sources. So it just depends on what the subject matter is, but I spend a lot of time. I like talking to people, as you can probably tell. I like talking to people because to me, not only can I get the information, but I can get the emotion, which is something that's hard to get when you research a book, especially if it's historical, original documentation. You're not getting the emotion, you're just getting the information. With people, you can get both.
You don't even know who they are.
It's something I know who they are, but their names will go to the grave with me because the people, especially the subject matter I often deal with, people's safety is in danger. Their lives could be in danger. And so, when I talk to them, they have to know that if they talk to me, that they're going to be safe. And so, and if I ever revealed anybody's name who I've talked to, no one would ever talk to me again because I wouldn't be trustworthy. So, the people I talked to, spoke to me, with that confidence that I was going to protect them. But in return, they gave me a lot of very valuable and interesting and oftentimes horrifyingly shocking information. And there are people that you could tell they were afraid. I was threatened, with the publication. We received threats. It's a very, very touchy subject matter that I deal with in that book, and some of the works I'm working on now, it's kind of the same thing.
Well, I'm surprised to know that in the U.S. these things can happen.
The U.S. is obviously a modern westernized country, but we're certainly not immune to that. And people are very protective over their what they do. And there's certain things and certain information that people do not want out there. And that causes a lot of nerves, and it causes people to get very upset and very angry. And when people get upset and angry and they feel that their livelihoods or their reputations might be threatened, things can go awry very quickly. So you have to be very careful.
I'm reading your book, and I am enjoying it a lot. Who is Desmond Cook?
Cook is, I guess he's a young man who has a sense of innocence about him a little bit. He's almost to the point of being annoyingly naive in some cases. But he's a graduate in history from the University of Georgia. He is also he's a veteran. He did spend time in Afghanistan. He suffers from anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and sometimes deals with depression. So he's a good person, but he's very flawed. And a lot of people say, do you see yourself in Desmond Cook? And actually, in most of my books, I see myself in the villain. I don't see myself in Desmond, but that's who he is. He's a very, he wants to believe in the good in people, but at the same time, he's constantly being shown that that's not true. There are a lot of people who are not good, and that a lot of the institutions that he believes in or believed in are not what they seem. And so there's always this sense with him of this loss of innocence, but he can be almost annoyingly naive where, even when people show him, hey, this is the way that things are, he sometimes still has a difficult time bringing himself to believe that. So that's kind of who his personality is. He's a good person. He's not a superhero. He's not an assassin. He's just an average guy. And that is one of the things that was important to me, is that I always liked the idea of an average person, or somebody who was just, you would never recognize on the street, being thrown into an extraordinary situation and having to deal with it. A lot of the books you see today, if they're suspense thrillers, they're like spies, they're, super spies with all these skills, or he's none of that. He's not, special really in any way. He just is an average guy who's put into these situations, and he has to find his way out of them.
So it's like real life.
That's the goal. I really want to strive towards that, because I thought there was kind of an absence of that, where in this genre, in suspense thrillers, especially dealing with a central character, that they're always this special, unique quality about them that for instance, like if you look at the Jack Reacher series, right? Jack Reacher is, he's an expert. He was a former military, police officer. He was, a hero, all these things. In Daniel Silva books, you have Gabriel Allon, who's a Mossad agent, and they're great books. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy them, but I wanted to do something a little different. And that's why I developed him the way I did.
Mm-hmm. And you also are writing the sequel.
Yeah, The Legal Killer came out. It's the sequel for that book. And it basically deals with an entirely different subject matter. So you can read The Legal Killer independently of the Arlington orders and still understand everything that's going on in the storyline. Basically, the story deals with, the book starts out with the murder of a U.S. attorney. And the murder takes place in California. And my main character, Des, he's in Georgia, and he just finished up his master's degree, and he gets a knock at his door. And when he opens the door, there are two FBI agents standing there, and they start asking him questions. Do you know Patricia Owens, which is the name of the U.S. attorney that was murdered in California? And he says, no, I've never heard of this person. And they, when was the last time you were in California? He says, gosh, not since I was a little kid. And they keep on peppering him with these questions over and over again. Finally, he says, what's this have to do with me? And they show him pictures of a woman, and the woman was murdered. She was nude from the waist up. Her throat's been slit. She's blindfolded. And next to the body are two brass plates filled with soot. And he says, I don't know this person. How am I involved in this? And they hand him a note, and the note says, find Des Cook, University of Georgia. He has all the answers. So the killer identified him, and he's clueless as to why. The killer contacts him and basically tells him that he has to go, he gives him riddles to solve, and he has to get to the locations that the riddle designates. And if he doesn't get there in a certain amount of time, another person dies. So he's trying to figure out what is the motivation of this person, how I'm involved, and what is their ultimate goal. And that's how the story unwinds.
Poor Desmond, he doesn't know what is going on.
Yeah, the poor guy just finds himself in one mess after another. Yeah, no, it's he seems to fall into trouble all the time.
And Elliot, you mentioned you can be obsessive and that you suffer from anxiety. I know exactly what it means. So do these traits make it challenging for you, like to know when your work is complete and ready to be published?
It's kind of a blessing and a curse, really. The blessing about being obsessive is that I really pay attention to what I do and I can really work on it. And I think it improves the quality of my work. At least I hope it does. But the curse is that it is difficult for me to let things go. I try not to read my work once it's published because then there's nothing I can do about it. But I really have to be disciplined from the standpoint that eventually I have to say, you know what, Elliot, you've gone over this work over and over and over again. It's time to let it go. It's time to move on. And I try to be disciplined in doing that. And it is difficult because occasionally I will have to read some of my work, which I hate doing, but I will read my work and I'll say, oh, why did I put that word in that sentence? Or why did I write that paragraph that way? Or why didn't I add this to the character? There's always little things. And I think most writers do that. I think most writers are always looking at their material thinking, gosh, I could have done something differently. And the ironic thing about it is 99% of the time, readers aren't going to know. They're not going to notice because readers take the reality or the story that is presented to them. They don't know all the crazy thoughts that are going on in the back of my head. They just know what I've written and they can read. So for them, when they read a story, that's what's presented to them. That's their whole thing. Oh, okay, that's it. That's what the author wanted to put down. They don't realize the self-torture that goes on in the background. So yeah, it does make me anxious. I have, as you mentioned, struggled with anxiety. Where I had to deal with it for quite some time. And again, I kind of, where I used to see it only as a curse, I kind of see it as a blessing and a curse now. I don't like feeling anxious when it happens. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but I also understand that a lot of times it's what drives me and makes me better at what I do.
Yeah, it happens a lot. As you said, many authors and not also people who are not writers also struggle with anxiety. And
I think writers are generally a neurotic bunch. I think we're very neurotic.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons too. I have a friend of mine who's a very prominent screenwriter, and he told me that writers are always looking for excuses not to write. And I think one of the reasons why we do that is because it does cause that kind of neurosis to come into play, and it's uncomfortable. So there are times when there are times I love writing where I'll sit down and go, wow, this is great. And there are other times I rather, jump in an open sewer than write because it's such a torturous experience. So it's just one of those things that you just have to pick and choose your times, I guess.
And how do you know when it is time to step away?
I don't. I wish I did. I wish there was like a light that would go off in the house saying, hey, Elliot, you're done. I really wish that would happen. I never feel that the story is completely done, that I couldn't tweak something here or there to make it better. But what I've done is that when I work with my editor and I'll go over things, my editor and I will talk and they'll say, we only think it needs one more go through. And it becomes a negotiation. Well, I think it needs 3 more go throughs. And okay, let's meet in the middle. Let's go 2 more times through this. And then once I'm done with the second time, I'm disciplined myself to say, okay, this is what I negotiated. I almost approach it like almost like a contract. Okay. You negotiated this contract, Elliot. You said 2 more times, that's it. Whether you like it or not, it's off to the printer. And that's kind of how I do it. I don't really, I never feel or know if it's done or not. I'm not that smart. So I kind of just figure out, all right, this is what I agreed to. I'm going to stick to my agreement.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of, you were forced to stop.
That's exactly right. I was forced to stop. That's, I look at it almost as I said, a contractual agreement that I've agreed that it's going to be 2 more times. Occasionally I'll try to argue and say, can't we just add one more go through? No, you agreed to this. Okay. And I give in.
And out of curiosity, are you a full-time writer?
I am. I do a lot of freelance writing for websites, blogs. That's what I do. So I enjoy writing stories. That's the thing I enjoy the most. A lot of what I do is what I like to call directed writing, meaning that I'm given a topic that the client wants me to write about, and I'll write on that topic. So it may not be a topic that I'm, really interested in, or it may not be a topic that I'm very familiar with. But yeah, that's what I do. I full-time write. I do freelance writing. You name it, everything for blogs, websites, promotions. That's kind of, and then of course my writing my novels.
That's a dream job.
I recognize how fortunate I am, because I do love it. There are times when I'll get grouchy when I have to write about a topic I'm not really interested in, and that happens often. I mean, like any, you have to write something, someone, I've written stuff, everything, you name it. I've written for websites that talk about tropical fish, to websites that do promotions for athletic gear, you name it, I've done it. So it's there's some that I'm more interested in others and I have more fun with than others, but that's part of the job. With any job, there's always going to be some parts you like and some parts you really don't like. And that's no different with writing.
How did you come up to write about suspense thrillers?
I think it was just something that I was a fan of. I'm a fan of that genre. I like I said, I mentioned Dan Brown. I'm a fan of James Ellroy. I really enjoy James Ellroy. Don Winston, I enjoy quite a bit. So something about that genre, and I like. But I'm not into like horror thrillers or straightforward, killer chasing after people. I like to challenge people, and I loved reading suspense thrillers that made me think, and even at times made me uncomfortable. That's kind of my goal as a writer. When I write my stories, I want my reader to feel real uncomfortable with what I'm asking them. I want them to question their own sense of values, their own sense of how they view the world, because I don't mind if, I've had people write me and say, your book really, pissed me off. I get that. That's okay. In fact, that's one of the highest compliments I can get. If I made someone really upset, I knew I did my job. So that is kind of where I like to go. So the suspense thriller that deals with real topics was something I just really would gravitate toward. And so when I started to write, that was basically how my mind worked. I never thought about writing romance or comedy, and I respect immensely the people that can do that, because I can't. That my books are straight suspense thrillers. So anybody that can do other genres, that's probably what they enjoy, and I'm sure they're very good at. So I just kind of found my little niche of the world and of the writing world, and that's where I went to.
Yeah, I understand you completely. When I was a kid, I used to love reading Agatha Christie. And when I read about your book, I said, this is the book that I was looking for to read. So I'm looking forward to start reading it.
Well, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you get the same enjoyment you got out of those books of Agatha Christie. Although Agatha Christie is obviously extremely well known and a very famous author, But yeah, that's always been my goal with books, is to basically to do what I like. Dan Brown, I saw in an interview one time, said something I thought was very profound. He was asked a question in an interview: do you write for your audience? And he said to the guy, he says, hell no. He says, that would be the kiss of death. He says, I don't write for my audience. He says, I write the books that I want to read. Wow. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because so much of what you see in entertainment today, whether it's movies, they're doing it for a particular audience. Whereas Brown was saying, no, I write the books that if I'm the reader, this is what I would want to read. And that was a very different approach. And that's kind of how I approach my writing as well.
Oh, very well said. And yeah, I believe we cannot please people. It's difficult. I think we have to write what we feel, in my opinion, of course. And then hopefully someone will like it.
Yeah, we're hoping that someone will like it. I heard a celebrity one time say that, I don't know the secret to success. Someone asked him what the secret of success was. He said, I don't know the secret of success, but I know the secret of failure is trying to please everyone. You just can't. I mean, I recognize there are going to be some people that like what I do, and there's going to be other people that don't like what I do, and that's okay. I think everyone has that. And as long as you're willing to accept that and not worry about trying to please everybody, I think you'll get more enjoyment out of what you do. And then on top of that, I think you'll have more success in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And Elliot, how can we find you and of course your books?
The best way to find me is at my website, which is elliottmasonbooks.com. That is 2 L's, 1 T. A lot of people they put 2 T's or 1 L. It's 2 L's, 1 T. elliottmasonbooks.com. That has all the information about me, my books, my video book trailers, which I have like these they're almost like movie trailers for books. I have those on my website. You can find my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target sells them. Pretty much anywhere you would order books, they're available. And if they want, they can also sign up for my newsletter. If you go to my website, at the top of the page, there'll be a link to a newsletter. Click on that, you put your name and your email in, and you'll be signed up, and you'll get a newsletter from me about once a month, sometimes once every 2 months, just depending on what's going on.
That's excellent. So Elliot, it was a pleasure to talk to you again. You are so talented.
Well, thank you. Make me blush. But thank you very much. And, it was a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to talking with you in the future again and hearing about all the latest news that you have. It's always exciting to hear.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.